Commander Kethvar stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dawn, his 4 arms crossed in satisfaction as he gazed upon the star maps displayed before him. The holographic projection showed the vast expanse of the Nexari Empire, over 3,000 star systems under their dominion, stretching across 2 spiral arms of the galaxy. Another successful conquest, Commander, reported his second-in-command, Officer Zeftol. The Kepler 442 system has surrendered. Their primitive civilization offers no resistance to our superior technology. Kethvar's mandibles clicked in approval. The Nexari had spent the last millennium expanding across the galaxy, encountering dozens of species, all of whom were technologically inferior. Some fought briefly before being overwhelmed by Nexari plasma weaponry and quantum shields. Others, wise enough to recognize their predicament, surrendered immediately and were absorbed into the Empire as vassals. As expected, Kethvar replied, his voice carrying the confidence of a species that had never met its equal. We are the first to achieve faster-than-light travel, the first to develop quantum computing, the first to harness the power of stars themselves. It is only natural that we should rule this galaxy. The Nexari homeworld of Vexthera had birthed a species destined for greatness. Their triple hearts pumped efficiently, their crystalline exoskeletons provided natural armor, and their four-armed physiology allowed for complex multitasking that other species could barely comprehend. Most importantly, their minds worked in perfect logical harmony, free from the emotional chaos that plagued lesser beings. Sir, we're receiving reports from the Outer Rim territories, Zeftol announced, manipulating the holographic interface with practiced precision. Survey Team Gamma has discovered another uninhabited system. Preliminary scans show 3 potentially habitable worlds. Excellent. Market for colonization. Kethvar moved closer to examine the data. What of the archaeological surveys? Have we found any more primitive ruins to study? The Nexari took pride in documenting the civilizations they encountered, preserving the history of species that had reached the stars but lacked the wisdom to thrive. Their archives contain thousands of records from dead worlds, species that had destroyed themselves through warfare, environmental collapse, or simple stagnation. Actually, sir, there's something unusual about this particular system, Zeftol hesitated. The orbital mechanics suggest artificial manipulation. Several asteroids appear to have been moved from their natural trajectories, and there are metallic signatures that don't match any known natural formations. Kethvar's interest was piqued. In all their conquests, they had never encountered evidence of large-scale stellar engineering. The most advanced civilizations they'd found could barely manage interplanetary travel, let alone the kind of massive projects that could alter asteroid belts. How long ago do you estimate these modifications occurred? That's the strange part, sir. Initial dating suggests these changes are ancient, possibly tens of thousands of years old. Far predating any civilization we've encountered. A moment of silence fell over the bridge. The idea that another species might have achieved such technological prowess millennia ago was unsettling. It challenged everything the Nexari believed about their natural superiority and their destiny as the galaxy's first true space empire. Prepare a full expedition, Kethvar ordered, his voice steady despite his growing curiosity. I want our best archaeologists and engineers on this. If there's something to be learned from these ruins, we will learn it. 3 weeks later, the research vessel Knowledge Seeker dropped out of quantum fold near the mysterious system, designated as Nexari Colonial Prospect 2847. Dr. Velnara, the Empire's leading xenoarchaeologist, pressed her face against the observation port, her compound eyes adjusting to take in the impossible sight before them. The asteroid belt wasn't natural, that much was immediately obvious. Massive chunks of rock and metal moved in perfect geometric patterns, their orbits forming intricate mathematical sequences that spoke of deliberate design. Some asteroids had been hollowed out, their surfaces marked with what appeared to be docking bays and structural frameworks that defied easy categorization. By the ancestors, whispered Lieutenant Jex Moth, the expedition's pilot. Look at the size of those installations. Dr. Velnara was already recording everything, her multiple arms working furiously across different instrument panels. The metallurgy is unlike anything in our databases. These alloys shouldn't be stable under normal conditions, yet they've maintained structural integrity for, preliminary scans suggest at least 40,000 years. Captain Rivkesh, a grizzled veteran of dozens of archaeological expeditions, floated nearby in the zero-gravity observation chamber. Any signs of the builders? Bodies, artifacts, data storage. Negative on biological remains, but Captain. Dr. Velnara paused, her voice filled with awe. These aren't just mining installations. Look at the energy readings from the central asteroid cluster. The main display shifted to show a complex of interconnected asteroids, each one the size of a small moon. Faint energy signatures pulsed between them in rhythmic patterns, like a vast technological heart still beating after millennia of abandonment. It's still active. Captain Rivkesh moved closer to examine the readings. After 40,000 years. Not just active, it's sophisticated beyond our current understanding. The power source appears to be drawing energy directly from the system's star through some kind of focused collection array. The efficiency readings are impossible according to our physics models. Lieutenant Jexmoth manipulated the ship's sensors, zooming in on one of the smaller installations. Captain, you need to see this. I'm detecting artificial gravity wells, atmospheric retention fields, and what looks like transportation conduits between the asteroids. The implications were staggering. The Nexari had always believed themselves to be the first species to achieve true mastery over space. Their empire was built on the foundation of technological superiority, their quantum-fold drives, their stellar engineering capabilities, their mastery of exotic matter. Yet here was evidence of a civilization that had surpassed them in every conceivable way. Dr. Velnara's instruments began detecting more subtle signs of the ancient builders. Microscopic traces of manufactured materials scattered throughout the asteroid belt, crystalline formations that showed signs of artificial growth patterns, and most intriguingly, data fragments embedded in the quantum foam itself. These aren't just ruins, she announced, her voice trembling with excitement. This is technology so advanced that it's become indistinguishable from natural phenomena. Whoever built this didn't just surpass us, they transcended the normal limitations of matter and energy. Captain Rivkesh felt a chill run through his crystalline exoskeleton. The Nexari Empire had been built on a simple premise: they were the galaxy's first and greatest civilization. Their expansion, their conquests, their entire cultural identity was predicated on their unique position as the universe's chosen species. Send a priority transmission to High Command, he ordered. We need a full archaeological fleet and our best xenotechnology specialists. And Captain. He paused, considering the implications of what they'd discovered. Mark this communication as classified at the highest levels. Until we understand what we're dealing with, this information doesn't leave this ship. As the knowledge seeker moved deeper into the asteroid field, none of them noticed the faint energy pulse that emanated from the central complex, a pulse that had been dormant for millennia, now awakening in response to their presence. 6 months had passed since the initial discovery, and the archaeological site had transformed into a bustling hub of Nexari scientific activity. The research station Deep Inquiry hung in space like a metallic flower, its modular sections extending toward the most promising asteroid clusters. Dozens of specialized vessels moved between the ancient installations, their crews working around the clock to unlock the secrets of the vanished builders. Dr. Velnara had barely slept in weeks. The discoveries kept coming, each one more extraordinary than the last. The archaeological team had managed to breach several of the smaller installations, revealing chambers filled with technology that seemed to operate on principles that challenged fundamental Nexari understanding of physics. The quantum resonance patterns are unlike anything we've theorized, she explained to the assembled team during their daily briefing. These devices appear to manipulate spacetime at the molecular level, creating localized pockets of altered physics where different rules apply. Engineer Prime Texcaler, one of the Empire's most brilliant technological minds, had been studying the power distribution systems. His usually confident demeanor had given way to frustrated bewilderment. The energy conduits aren't just efficient, they're impossible. They're transmitting power at 127% efficiency, which violates the conservation of energy. Yet my instruments confirm the readings repeatedly. The breakthrough came when they finally gained access to what appeared to be a data storage facility buried deep within the largest asteroid. Unlike the crystalline data matrices used by the Nexary, this information was stored in the quantum structure of specially prepared materials, a technology that allowed for virtually unlimited data density. "We've managed to extract some basic pictographic sequences," announced Dr. Morveth, the team's linguistic specialist. The builders called themselves, "The translation is difficult, but the closest Nexary equivalent would be, those who walk between stars." The first clear images to emerge from the data were stunning. The builders had been bipedal, roughly humanoid in shape but with distinctly elongated proportions. They stood approximately 2 meters tall, with elongated skulls and what appeared to be additional sensory organs along their necks and arms. Most remarkably, they seemed to possess only 2 arms, a limitation that the Nexary found difficult to comprehend. How did they achieve such technological sophistication with such primitive physiology, wondered Captain Rivkash. 2 arms, single-heart circulatory systems, what appears to be organic rather than crystalline skeletal structure, by all logical analysis, they should have been limited to basic tool use. Dr. Velnara had been thinking about that same question. Perhaps their advancement wasn't purely technological. Look at these neural mapping sequences we've recovered. Their brain structures show unprecedented complexity in regions associated with pattern recognition, spatial reasoning, and what we might call intuitive leap processing. The data revealed glimpses of a civilization that had achieved wonders through paths the Nexary had never considered. Where the Nexary had perfected their technology through logical, methodical advancement, these builders seemed to have made conceptual breakthroughs that defied systematic analysis. They called their empire something that translates roughly to, the eternal reach, Dr. Morveth continued. The records suggest they controlled not just thousands of star systems, but potentially entire galactic regions. Their expansion appears to have lasted for millions of years. Engineer Prime Texcaler looked up from his analysis station. Millions of years? That's impossible. No civilization could maintain technological and social coherence over such timescales. The logistical challenges alone would be insurmountable. Yet the evidence suggests they did exactly that, Dr. Velnara replied. And more disturbing, the data indicates their disappearance was sudden. Not gradual decline, not environmental collapse, not even warfare. One moment their empire spanned the galaxy, the next, nothing. The implication sent a chill through the assembled scientists. If a civilization so advanced could vanish without warning, what did that mean for the Nexary Empire? What force could have been powerful enough to erase such a technologically superior species from existence? As if summoned by their thoughts, alarms began sounding throughout the research station. Lieutenant Jex Motha's voice crackled over the communication system. "All teams, we have a situation. The central installation is showing massive energy spikes. Something's activating down there." The central asteroid complex had become a beacon of impossible energy. Streams of golden light now connected the various installations, creating a web of power that pulsed with rhythmic precision. Dr. Velnara and her team watched from the observation deck of the Deep Inquiry, instruments struggling to measure the forces being unleashed below. "Energy output is approaching stellar levels," Engineer Prime Texcaler reported, his voice tight with concern. "Whatever we've triggered, it's drawing power from across the entire asteroid field. The ancient systems aren't just activating, they're networking together into some kind of unified structure." Captain Rivkesh had ordered all excavation teams to evacuate to safe distances, but Dr. Velnara had insisted on maintaining minimum safe observation range. This was the discovery of a lifetime, possibly of several lifetimes, and she refused to retreat when they were so close to answers. "There." Dr. Morveth pointed at the central installation. "Holographic projections are manifesting." The space around the largest asteroid began to shimmer, and suddenly three-dimensional images materialized in the vacuum. The projections were massive, easily visible from their distant observation point, and they showed clear representations of the builders, the enigmatic bipedal species that had once ruled the galaxy. But these weren't historical records. The figures moved with purpose, interacting with each other and with control systems that appeared to be responding to their commands. The holographic beings began manipulating the asteroid field itself, adjusting orbits, redirecting power flows, and activating dormant systems throughout the complex. "Impossible," whispered Engineer Prime Tech Scalar. "Those can't be simple recordings. They're responding to current conditions, adapting to the changes we've made to the installation." Dr. Velnara was recording everything, her instruments capturing terabytes of data every second. "They're not recordings. They're some form of artificial intelligence, preserving not just the knowledge of the builders but their actual cognitive patterns, their decision-making processes." The holographic figures seemed to notice the Nexary research station. One of them, taller than the others and wearing what appeared to be ceremonial robes, turned toward their position and began manipulating a control interface. Suddenly, the research station's communication systems activated on their own. A voice filled the bridge, not transmitted through their speakers, but somehow resonating directly in their minds. The words came in perfect Nexary, despite being spoken by beings that had vanished 40,000 years before the Nexary had even developed language. "Greetings, young travelers. I am Archive Prime Marcus Thompson, last director of the Human Stellar Authority. Your archaeological excavations have activated our contingency protocols." The Nexary team exchanged stunned glances. The translation systems had rendered the being's name and title, but the implications were staggering. These weren't just any ancient builders, they had been called humans, and their empire had been called the Human Stellar Authority. "You speak our language," Captain Rivkesh managed to say. "How is that possible?" The holographic figure smiled, an expression that somehow conveyed warmth despite being projected across the void. "We have been monitoring your activities since you first entered this system. Our quantum archives contain linguistic matrices for over 47 million galactic species, including your own. The Nexary achievement of faster-than-light travel was predictable, given your technological development patterns." Dr. Velnara found her voice. "You've been watching us. For how long?" "Since your species first developed spaceflight, approximately 1200 years ago by your reckoning. We have similar monitoring stations in over 3 million star systems, observing the development of younger civilizations." Engineer Prime Tech Scalar stepped forward. "Your empire, the Human Stellar Authority, what happened to it? Why did you disappear?" The expression on Archive Prime Thompson's face grew somber. "We didn't disappear, young engineer. We evolved. What you see here are the remnants of humanity's physical phase, preserved for exactly this purpose, to guide younger species when they reached sufficient technological development." "Physical phase?" Dr. Velnara asked. 43,000 years ago, humanity transcended the limitations of biological existence. We became something beyond matter and energy, beyond the conventional dimensions of space and time. But we left these archives, these guides, for species like yours who would follow similar developmental paths. The implications were overwhelming. The Nexary had discovered not just evidence of a previous galactic empire, but proof that their own evolutionary path was neither unique nor unprecedented. They were not the first, and they would not be the last. "Why are you telling us this?" Captain Rivkesh asked. Archive Prime Thompson's image flickered slightly, as if the systems maintaining his projection were straining under some unseen pressure. "Because your species is approaching a critical juncture, Captain. The same juncture that all technological civilizations face. And unlike us, you may not survive the transition." The revelation that humanity had transcended physical existence should have been the most shocking part of Archive Prime Thompson's message, but Dr. Velnara found herself fixated on his final words. "The same juncture that all technological civilizations face." The implication that the Nexary might not survive sent a chill through the research team. "What kind of juncture?" she asked, her scientific curiosity overriding her instinctive fear. What threatens civilizations at our level of development? Archive Prime Thompson's holographic form gestured, and the space around them filled with new projections. They showed star maps, but not like any the Nexari had seen. These charts displayed the galaxy across vast timescales, with civilizations rising and falling like waves across the cosmic shore. Every species that achieves faster-than-light travel and begins expanding across the galaxy faces the same challenge, Thompson explained. We call it the convergence point, the moment when a civilization's technological advancement outpaces its wisdom, when its power to reshape the universe exceeds its understanding of the consequences. The projections showed dozens of different species, all following similar patterns of development. Rapid technological growth, galactic expansion, the establishment of vast interstellar empires, and then, sudden, catastrophic collapse. The mathematics are inexorable, Thompson continued. Advanced civilizations inevitably develop technologies that can remake matter at the quantum level, manipulate spacetime, harness the energy of stars. But power without wisdom leads to self-destruction. Engineer Prime Tex Kaler studied the projections intently. What kind of self-destruction? Warfare? Environmental collapse? Sometimes. But more often, it's simpler and more tragic. Advanced civilizations discover that reality itself is far more fragile than they imagined. A single miscalculation in quantum engineering can unravel entire star systems. An experiment in dimensional manipulation can tear holes in spacetime that consume everything around them. Dr. Velnara felt her hearts racing. The Nexari Empire was already experimenting with many of the technologies Thompson described. Their quantum-fold drives, their stellar engineering projects, their exotic matter research, were they unknowingly approaching their own destruction? How did humanity survive this? Convergence point? Captain Rivkesh asked. Thompson's expression grew distant. We didn't, not in the way you might understand survival. We came very close to destroying ourselves. In fact, we did destroy our physical civilization. The archives you've discovered are built in what was once the Sol system, humanity's birth world. We had to sacrifice our material existence to prevent a cascade reaction that would have sterilized half the galaxy. The silence that followed was profound. The asteroid field around them, which they had thought to be evidence of humanity's technological triumph, was actually a monument to their ultimate sacrifice. But we preserved our consciousness, our knowledge, our essence in quantum matrices distributed throughout the galaxy, Thompson continued. We became something new, something beyond the physical limitations that had nearly destroyed us. And we left these archives to guide other species when they faced the same choices. Dr. Morveth, who had been quietly analyzing the linguistic patterns, spoke up. How many other species have you guided? Over the past 40,000 years. 1,733 civilizations have reached the convergence point. Of those, only 47 chose transcendence. The others. Thompson paused. The others chose to remain physical and faced the consequences. The mathematical reality was stark and terrifying. Less than 3% of advanced civilizations survived their technological adolescence. The galaxy, which the Nexari had thought was theirs to inherit, was actually a graveyard filled with the remnants of species that had reached for godhood and fallen short. What are our options? Dr. Velnara asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. The same as every species faces, Thompson replied. You can attempt to control your technological development, accepting limitations and potentially stagnating. You can continue your current path and risk destruction. Or you can choose transcendence, abandon your physical forms and join the community of evolved consciousnesses that guide and protect the galaxy. Engineer Prime Tex Kaler looked skeptical. And if we refuse all these options? If we believe the Nexari can succeed where others have failed? Thompson's image flickered again, and for a moment, his expression showed something that might have been pity. Then you will join the vast majority of civilizations whose ruins dot the galaxy. Your empire will collapse, your species will vanish, and in a few million years, some younger race will discover your artifacts and wonder what became of the mighty Nexari. The research team fell silent, contemplating the magnitude of the choice facing their entire species. They had come seeking archaeological treasures and found instead the ultimate test of their civilization's survival. "How long do we have?" Captain Rivkesh asked quietly. "Based on your current technological trajectory, approximately 300 years before you reach the critical threshold. Perhaps less if you continue to expand your exotic matter research." 300 years. In the context of the Nexari Empire's thousand-year history, it was barely a blink of an eye. Word of the discovery had reached the highest levels of the Nexari Empire within hours of Archive Prime Thompson's revelation. The research station Deep Inquiry had been joined by the Imperial flagship Dominant Truth, carrying Supreme Commander Kex Vala himself and the Empire's ruling council. The council chamber aboard the flagship had been configured for maximum security, with quantum encryption fields preventing any outside surveillance. The 12 members of the High Command sat in their traditional formation, their crystalline exoskeletons gleaming under the chamber's illumination as they debated the future of their entire species. "The evidence is undeniable," Dr. Velnara reported, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was describing. "The human stellar authority controlled a galactic empire that dwarfed our own, possessed technology that we can barely comprehend, and ultimately faced destruction because of their own advancement. Supreme Commander Kex Vala, whose 4 arms bore the ceremonial scarring of a dozen military campaigns, listened with the patience of a being who had spent centuries making decisions that affected billions of lives. And this. Archive Prime Thompson claims that we face the same fate." "Not claims," Supreme Commander, Engineer Prime Tex Kaler interjected. "The mathematical models are consistent across multiple analyses. Technological civilizations follow predictable development patterns, and we are currently tracking exactly along the same trajectory that led to humanity's transformation." High Counselor Mexthera, the Empire's chief scientist, manipulated a holographic display showing the Nexari's current research projects. "Our exotic matter experiments, our quantum engineering programs, our stellar manipulation technologies, according to the human archives, these are precisely the areas where civilizations typically trigger catastrophic failures." "You're suggesting we abandon our research," demanded High Counselor Vex Colon, whose military background made him instinctively resistant to accepting limitations. "Surrender our technological advancement because some ancient aliens claim it's dangerous?" Dr. Velnara had anticipated this objection. The archives contain detailed records of 1700 civilizations that faced this choice. The patterns are unmistakable. Those who continued unrestricted technological development invariably destroyed themselves within centuries of reaching our current level. And those who chose this transcendence that Thompson described? Supreme Commander Kex Vala asked. "They abandoned physical existence entirely," Dr. Morveth explained. "Their consciousness was preserved in quantum matrices, allowing them to continue existing but no longer as biological beings. They became pure information, able to manipulate reality at levels we can't comprehend but no longer capable of physical experience." The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The choice facing the Nexari Empire was not simply about survival, it was about the fundamental nature of what it meant to be Nexari. High Counselor Jex Vanna, the Empire's chief philosopher, spoke carefully. "To choose transcendence would mean the end of Nexari civilization as we understand it. Our culture, our physical achievements, our entire way of life would become obsolete. But we would survive," countered High Counselor Tex Moeller. "Our knowledge, our consciousness, our essential selves would continue." "As what?" Vex Colon demanded. "As incorporeal ghosts haunting the galaxy, watching younger species make the same choices we were too cowardly to make." Supreme Commander Kex Vala raised one of his arms, a gesture that commanded immediate silence. "The human archives, do they contain specific information about how civilizations have successfully navigated this crisis? Options beyond transcendence or destruction?" Dr. Velnara consulted her data tablets. There are records of a few species that managed to achieve what the archives call controlled advancement. They deliberately limited their technological development, accepting slower progress in exchange for greater safety. And what became of them? The Supreme Commander asked. Most eventually stagnated and declined. Without continued technological advancement, they became vulnerable to cosmic disasters, resource depletion, and competition from younger species who surpassed them. Only a handful survived long-term, and they exist as relatively minor civilizations with limited influence. Engineer Prime Tex Kaler had been studying the technical specifications in the human archives. There is one other option mentioned in the records. Some civilizations chose a hybrid path, selective transcendence. They preserved a portion of their population in physical form while allowing volunteers to undergo transformation. Creating two separate species from one, High Counselor Mexthera mused. The physical Nexari continuing our traditional existence, while transcended Nexari gained the power to guide and protect them. Supreme Commander Kex Vala stood, his imposing form commanding the attention of the entire council. We have 300 years, according to the archives. That gives us time to study these options carefully, to understand the full implications of each choice. But Supreme Commander, Dr. Velnara interjected, the archives also suggest that waiting too long can reduce our options. The closer a civilization comes to the critical threshold, the less control they have over the process. Then we must not waste the time we have, Kex Vala decided. I'm authorizing the creation of a new branch of research, the Convergence Project. Our best minds will study the human archives, analyze our current technological trajectory, and develop concrete plans for each possible path. As the council members began to disperse, each contemplating the weight of the decision ahead, none of them noticed the subtle energy fluctuations emanating from the human installations. Archive Prime Thompson and his fellow preserved consciousnesses were monitoring the Nexari discussions with great interest, for they knew something the Nexari had not yet discovered. The choice they faced was more urgent than they realized. 2 years had passed since the discovery of the human archives, and the Convergence Project had become the Nexari Empire's most classified and resource-intensive research initiative. Dr. Velnara now served as its director, overseeing dozens of research teams spread across multiple installations throughout the Empire. The findings had been both illuminating and disturbing. The human archives contained not just historical records, but active monitoring data from across the galaxy. Archive Prime Thompson and the Transcended Human Consciousness Network had been observing galactic civilizations for 40,000 years, documenting every species that reached the critical threshold. The situation is more complex than we initially understood, Dr. Velnara reported to the emergency session of the High Command. The human archives weren't just preserving knowledge, they were actively influencing galactic development. She activated a holographic display showing a three-dimensional map of the galaxy, marked with the locations of thousands of civilizations across time. The transcended humans have been subtly guiding technological development for millennia, preventing certain species from advancing too quickly while encouraging others to reach the convergence point on a controlled timeline. Supreme Commander Kex Vala studied the display intently. You're saying we're not making our choices freely? That humanity has been manipulating galactic civilization? Not manipulating, Dr. Velnara corrected. Managing. The transcended humans discovered that the convergence point crisis threatens more than individual civilizations. Uncontrolled technological development by multiple species simultaneously can create cascade effects that destabilize entire galactic regions. Engineer Prime Tex Kaler, who had spent months studying the technical specifications, added his analysis. The exotic matter experiments that destroy civilizations don't just affect their local space. They create quantum resonances that can make similar experiments more dangerous for nearby species. The humans have been spacing out the technological development of different civilizations to prevent these cascade effects. The implications were staggering. The Nexari Empire's expansion, their technological achievements, even their discovery of the human archives, all of it had been anticipated and subtly influenced by forces they had never imagined existed. High Counselor Mexthera raised the question that everyone was thinking. If the humans have such control over galactic development, why reveal themselves to us at all? Why not continue their hidden manipulation? Dr. Velnara had been wondering about that same question. The answer, when she found it, had changed her understanding of everything they thought they knew about their situation. Because the human network is failing, she announced, her words falling like stones into the silence of the council chamber. The quantum matrices that preserve transcendent consciousness aren't permanent. They degrade over time, and after 40,000 years, the network is approaching critical breakdown. Archive Prime Thompson's image materialized in the center of the chamber, his holographic form flickering more noticeably than before. Dr. Velnara is correct. We calculate approximately 50 years before our consciousness matrices reach minimum viable coherence levels. The network that has guided galactic civilization since our transcendence is dying. And without your guidance? Supreme Commander Kexvala asked. Chaos, Thompson replied simply. 17 civilizations are currently approaching their convergence points, with 12 more reaching critical thresholds within the next century. Without coordinated management, the probability of catastrophic cascade failures approaches certainty. The council chamber erupted in excited discussion as the full scope of the crisis became clear. The Nexari weren't just facing their own civilizational choice, they were potentially the last species in a position to inherit humanity's role as galactic guardians. Dr. Velnara called for silence. The archives contain complete technical specifications for consciousness preservation and transcendence. If we choose that path, we could not only save ourselves but assume responsibility for guiding other civilizations through their own convergence points. Become the new shepherds of the galaxy, High Counselor Jex Van mused. Trade our physical existence for cosmic responsibility. Or, Engineer Prime Texcaler added, we could attempt to develop new solutions. The human approach isn't the only possible path. We might find ways to preserve both physical existence and galactic stability. Supreme Commander Kexvala stood slowly, the weight of decision visible in every movement. The choice is no longer just about the survival of the Nexari Empire. It's about the future of intelligent life in the galaxy. Archive Prime Thompson's image stabilized momentarily. You have perhaps 10 years to decide, Supreme Commander. Beyond that point, the degradation of our network will accelerate rapidly. Whatever path you choose, it must be chosen soon. As the council session concluded, Dr. Velnara remained behind, staring at the galactic display. Thousands of civilizations, millions of worlds, billions upon billions of intelligent beings, all of them dependent on decisions made by species they would never know existed. The Nexari had discovered they were not the first space empire, but they might well be the last with the power to preserve galactic civilization itself. The burden of that knowledge was almost unbearable. Yet as she watched the slow pulse of light that marked her own homeworld on the display, Dr. Velnara felt something she hadn't expected, not fear or despair, but a profound sense of purpose. The universe had given the Nexari a choice that would define not just their own future, but the future of countless worlds yet to develop intelligence. Whether they chose transcendence, found a new path, or failed entirely, their decision would echo across the galaxy for millions of years to come. The weight of that responsibility was terrifying, but it was also the greatest honor any civilization could receive. The First Empire was ending. The question now was whether the Nexari had the wisdom to become worthy successors, or if they would be remembered only as the species that let the galaxy fall into chaos. The choice was theirs, but time was running out. End of story.